Mesopotamia and Assyria, from the earliest ages to the present time, with illustrations of their natural history, by J. Bailey Fraser, Esquire, author of An Historical and Descriptive Account of Persia, etc., with a map and engravings by Jackson. Preface. In the work now presented to the public, the author has endeavoured to bring under one view all that is known of the history and aspect, moral, physical and political, of the provinces of Mesopotamia and Assyria, and to give at the same time a sketch of the causes that have produced the revolutions of which they have been the theatre. The subject is extensive and complicated, and the difficulty of compressing the matter which it embraces into one volume was proportionally great. That all which might have been done towards the attainment of this object has really been effected is more than the author ventures to assert, but he can safely affirm that no pains have been spared in collecting the most suitable materials to be found in the writings of others, as well as in applying such as have been furnished by his own acquaintance with those interesting countries. In point of fact, little original matter can be expected, unless we were to recover some of the lost works of the ancients, or to succeed in deciphering those inscriptions in the cuneiform character, which have hitherto baffled the researches of the learned. Late discoveries indeed seem to afford some reasonable hope of success, but it must now be admitted that, though several ingenious conjectures have been made, and some plausible speculations have been hazarded, no accession has been obtained to our knowledge of facts, or to the author's knowledge of facts. The subject in general therefore remains as dark and uncertain as before. Nearly all that can be said or known respecting the history, chronology, religion and manners of these primeval empires will be found collected in the Universal Ancient History, a work of very great learning and research. But those who desire to apply to the original sources of information may, in addition to the sacred scriptures of the Old Testament, consult the works of Herodotus, Diodorus, Siculus, Arrian, Xenophon, Plutarch, and such others as are usually cited by writers on the subject. Corey's Ancient Fragments will supply the English reader with what remains of the works of Berosus, Abydenus, Apollodorus, and Alexander Polyhistor. Hyde, Bryant, Jackson, Hales, Usher, and Newton may be referred to for chronology. Sir William Drummond, Faber, Burckhardt, Beck will afford food enough for those who delight in ingenious speculations, while Prideaux and Russell will show what can be done to connect profane with sacred history. For light to guide him in geographical description, the inquirer must have recourse to the works of Ptolemy, of Strabo, and of Cellarius, together with the minor geographies of Hudson and Isidore of Charax, to Abul Faida and Ibn Hawkul among the Mohammedans, while for comparative geography his main help will be found in D'Anville, Reynolds and Vincent. Williams, in his geographical memoir, has presented some learned disquisitions, and the researches of Rich, himself a man of classical learning as well as a judicious observer, are of the highest value. The works of Nahrein treat of every branch of the ancient history of these regions, and though we may not agree in all his conclusions, they are entitled to respect as the opinions of a laborious and accurate inquirer into Oriental antiquities. Our information regarding what may be termed the Middle Ages of those countries, that is, from the destruction of Babylon by Darius down to the Mohammedan era, is greatly more extensive and complete than that which we possess respecting the remote history. Those who are anxious for a more intimate acquaintance with the events of this period will find ample materials in the pages of the Universal History and in the more eloquent chapters of Gibbon. Is that Edward Gibbon? And all that relates to the history and conditions of the Christian population in those provinces and of the various sects that have successfully sprung up or still continue to exist. The best authority is Asemani, whose Oriental Dictionary is a mine of invaluable information on such subjects. Mosheim and other church historians may likewise be consulted, as will Bingham, the author of Ecclesiastes' Origins, though these all draw chiefly from Asemani. Of the condition of modern Mesopotamia, that is, from the Mohammedan conquest to the present time. Notices are to be found in the works of various travellers, from Wolf and Benjamin of Tudela downwards, but less is known of Assyria, which now constitutes a portion of the Turkish Empire, and there is no general account of the present state of the two provinces, although much valuable information is to be gathered from the works of Niebuhr, Oliver, Rich, Buckingham, Porter and Rousseau. These materials, together with what the author has been able to glean from other sources, as well as from his own observations, form the basis of this portion of the present work. And he must here take occasion to express his implications to Colonel Taylor, political resident at Baghdad, to whom he had been indebted not only for the valuable manuscript journal of the late Mr. Elliot, but for much important information on matters connected with the statistics of the country as well as with the manners of the people. Much still remains to be done in both provinces, for there are many districts of which as little or nothing is known. The labours of modern travellers are, however, daily throwing light on their antiquities, natural history and geography. And when the works of Colonel Chesney, Major Rawlinson and others shall have been given to the public, and Mr. Ainsworth and his colleagues shall have completed the expedition they have undertaken under the auspices of the Royal Geographical Society, the secrets of some of the most interesting districts in Upper Mesopotamia and Kurdistan, especially those of Sinjar, Hatteras and Mount Uwa, will, it is expected, to be laid fully open to the European world. In the meantime, as every source of information, both private and public, has been made use of in combination with the author's personal knowledge of the country, it is hoped that the geographical account which has been given will be found at once entirely accurate, and as particular too as the limits of such a work will permit. In this description may be included the characteristic details, manners and customs of the Arab and Kurdish tribes, which, derived chiefly from actual observation, have been confirmed by various persons, whose opinions, from the opportunity of judging, are entitled to the highest credit. The sketch of the natural history of these provinces has likewise been drawn up with an anxious desire to afford a summary of whatever valuable information has been collected upon the subject. Of the decorations of this volume, the author has only to observe that they are all engraved from drawings made by himself upon the spot, and that he can vouch at least for their accuracy, nothing having been added to the original sketch except the particular effect which was deemed appropriate to the subject. The utmost care has been bestowed on the construction of the map, which will be found to contain all the additions made by recent travellers to our geographical knowledge of the interesting country which occupies the basin of the Tigris and Euphrates. May 1841. Contents page. Chapter 1, General Description of Mesopotamia and Assyria. Chapter 2, History of the Assyrian Monarchy. And the contents page is continued. Engravings, maps of Mesopotamia and Assyria, view of Baghdad, Mesopotamian Arabs and their tents. Chapter 1, Mesopotamia and Assyria, Ancient and Modern. General description of Mesopotamia and Assyria. High claims of these countries on our regard, interest attached to their early history, inquiry checked by scantiness of authentic records, little known of the origin of either the Assyrian or Babylonian Empire and their intimate connection with each other, definition of Assyria according to the Greek historians, the Jewish writers and so forth. It may be safely asserted that there are no regions in the world which possess more powerful claims on our regard than those which form the subject of the following pages. Mesopotamia and Assyria, if not actually the cradle of mankind, were, at all events, the theatre on which the descendants of Noah performed their first conspicuous part. The plains of Shinar, or Sumer, witnessed not only the defeat of that presumptuous enterprise which scattered them abroad upon the face of the earth, but also the exploits of the mighty hunter, that be Nimrud, and the triumph of his ambition in the establishment of the first monarchy recorded either by sacred or profane writers. On the banks of the Euphrates and the Tigris did the two greatest cities of the ancient world rise into magnificence. Nineveh, which repented in sackcloth and ashes at the preaching of Jonah, and Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, which elevated by the proud Nebuchadnezzar to the height of splendour, listened to his impious boastings and saw his deep humiliation. There did Daniel prophesy and expound the mysterious warnings of the Most High. And there did Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego experience the signal protection of that almighty power whom they feared and obeyed. By the capture, too, of that superb metropolis was the word of prophecy fulfilled, and the rule of the great Cyrus made it a Messiah of type by God, according to the scriptures. He wasn't actually the Messiah, as a lot of people think. An instrument in the divine hand consolidated over Asia, and on the field of Arbela was that splendid empire in its turn overthrown by the rising power of the Macedonian conqueror, Alexander the Great, who after his brilliant careers returned to the capital of Assyria to end his days. So either King Philip, his father, or Alexander the Great. In like manner have the plains of Mesopotamia borne witness to the catastrophe of Cunaxa, and the gallant bearing of the indomitable 10,000, seen the defeat and death of Crassus, the retreat of Mark Antony, the fall of the apostate Julian, the disgraceful peace of his successor, and the changing fortunes of the bold Heraclius. Events so various and important must invest the countries where they occurred with a deep interest, and that portion of them in particular which has reference to the early post-Diluvian ages cannot fail to excite the curiosity of those who delight in marking the moral progress of the human race. But all hope of tracing clearly these events of their early history is checked by the scantiness of means. For, while the annals of more recent times are illustrated by numerous records, the glimpses of light shed from authentic sources upon the remote period to which our views are now directed serve only to show that at a very uncertain era, after the universal deluge or flood, well, we're not too sure if it was actually universal, because we have timetables of history by Bernard Grun, based upon Werner Stein's Culture Fire Plan, the new third revised edition, page 3, column G, daily life. It actually says here, disastrous floods in Mesopotamian region only. And we believe, but we may have to re-ask, the native-born Aramaic speaking translator from Mesopotamia, Syria, Victor N. Alexander, if that, according to the Mesopotamian history, documentary, research, etc., we made a documentary on it, actually verifies that there were floods in that Mesopotamian region only. Because remember, him may have been saying that in his translation project, hinting at that. Not a worldwide or global flood, as all these Christians, etc., think happened, right? Okay, we believe with science, proven facts, that it was the ice age, it was over, it melted, the polar ice caps melted, all the ice melted, and then there was a great flood, worldwide flood, which killed all the dinosaurs, etc. Okay, not just one universal flood. Because if it went through the Grand Canyon, if it was like the land was separated from, say, the entire landmass, and it drifted away and it became the Americas, then if the universal or global flood happened, then sure, it would have gone through there and caused all those caverns and, you know, all the proof that these archaeologists and whoever have brought forward, right? Yeah, sure. Even Australia and New Zealand, yet undiscovered, would have been flooded as well. Would have been underwater if it was universal or global. But all hope of tracing clearly the events of the early history is checked by the scantiness of means, for which the annals of more recent times are illustrated by numerous records. The glimpses of light shed from authentic sources upon the remote period to which our views are now directed serve only to show that at a very uncertain era or age, after the universal deluge, which we just verified it wasn't, a monarchy was founded on the Euphrates by Nimrud, the son of Cush, which rose into considerable importance, and that at some subsequent period it was overthrown by a neighbouring power, the seat of which was on the bush banks of the Tigris. So there's people out there who dropped us comments and said Kush was in Africa, everybody came from Africa, la 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 la. Here's the evidence here that Kush was in the Near East. We've already proved it before, but we're verifying it again from this author's book. Okay. Kush with a C in the Near East, Mesopotamia, Syria, or Syria, that region, geographical location. Okay. And then sometime in the Bible, maybe Abraham's descendants or someone after that, we believe it's Abraham's descendants, went down to Canaan. Okay. They lived there for a certain amount of time, and then they might have migrated to Africa, met a black tribe there, African black tribe there, merged with them, intermingled, intermarried, and had these children, descendants, okay, who were half breeds, half black, half white, yeah, or half light tanned, whatever, however you want to put it, right? And they became this tribe, this new tribe, the descendants of Cush with a C, but they had a K. So that's basically so you can identify which one is which and where did that first one come from. Okay, you can trace its origins to the Near East, Mesopotamia, Syria, and you trace the second one to its origins in Africa, whatever region, geographical location it was in Africa at the time. Okay. It's like having the original ancient, very old Aramaic. Why we say very old, or why the translator Victor Alexander always stresses very old, is because it differentiates between that long dead, no longer spoken, no longer written language, okay, from thousands and thousands of years ago, with the modern vernacular or the modern version or dialect of that original old, long dead, no longer written, no longer spoken language. Okay? So you can tell the difference between the two. Because most people think they know Aramaic, they know it better than a native born Aramaic speaker because they went to a seminar, they went to a university and learnt it there. They learnt modern Syriac, modern Aramaic, modern Greek, probably Latinized form of Greek, and probably Israeli Hebrew. But they come out and they say, oh, that Victor Alexander, he don't know how to pronounce that properly. Oh, it should be this. It's not Abun, the Bishmayards, Abun, or this. Oh, I speak it better than him. Yeah, go figure. You're a native speaker? No. You learnt from a course, from some professor, yeah, or somebody at a university or seminar or Bible college or whatever. Okay? There's a difference there. Mesopotamia and Assyria have from the most ancient times been so intimately connected both geographically and politically that they will be most clearly described in conjunction with each other. Herodotus, Strabo and others use the latter appellation as including both in conjunction with certain other provinces, in Nahrein and so forth and so forth. The Jewish writers, on the other hand, use it to express a distinct nation of conquerors and the founders of an empire. Yeah, they were a formidable army. They'd march and make the ground shake, and they'd put the fears of the people. Oh, here comes the Assyrians. Because what they would do, apparently, historically, they would invade, pillage, and plunder, put it nicely. Yeah, and then they'd take their prisoners, chop off their head, put it on a wall, like you have those animals, you know, those trophies, like that sort of thing. That's how vicious they were. That's how hard they were, right? Everywhere they went, everyone was afraid of them because they were mighty as at one particular point. They were most feared. The Jewish writers, on the other hand, used it to express a distinct nation of conquerors and the founders of an empire having a seat of government at Nineveh, and which flourished between the years 800 and 700 BC. And here's a footnote at the bottom. Manual of Ancient Geography by A.H. Nahrein, Oxford, 1829. 8VO paragraph 25-26 to have a look at it, right? Check it out. Hence, to define the limits of Assyria according to the ideas of ancient historians would be impossible, because like those of all eastern sovereignties, they varied with the fortune of every chief who held the scepter. But viewing both countries merely in the light of geographical divisions of Asia, it will not be difficult to indicate their boundaries. Loosely speaking, Assyria may be considered as terminated on the west by the course of the Tigris, on the north by Armenia, on the northeast and east by Mount Zagros and the Gorian range, and on the southeast by the province of Susiana or Khuzestan. Mesopotamia may be more strictly defined as embraced by the Tigris and the Euphrates, except on the north, where it meets the mountains of Armenia. But it will be proper to specify more exactly the various regions which are to pass under our review, or this author's review in this book. If a line were drawn from Agana Madan by Eosin to Sert along the crest of the intervening heights, and from there carried behind Amadea along the tops of Aga, Dag or Zagros, including Solimania and Zahab, till it should reach the pass of Kirend, and extended again by a course comprehending Mindali to a point upon the Tigris somewhat below Sifan. Such a line, taken in conjunction with that river from its source to the point where they meet, will circumscribe pretty accurately by the ancient Assyria. Again, if the same line were continued westward to Malatia on the Euphrates, the boundary of Mesopotamia would from thence be indicated. It's actually not called Mesopotamia originally, it's Bet Nahrein, something like that, because this here is a Greek Latin loanword, which means that geographical location possessed by certain people that spoke a certain language, right? Which basically possessed or filled by a certain people. Okay? Would from thence be indicated as already observed by the course of that river. But as both banks are comprehended in a basin, it may physically as well politically be regarded as connected with each other. We shall include in our description of all places of importance on the one as well as the other. By Ptolemy, Assyria is divided from northwest to southeast into the provinces of Arapachitus and the Abin, which is sometimes used to designate the whole country, Abelitus, Kalakine, Apolloniatus, and Citacine. It's hard to say names for me. Forgive us for saying it all wrong. Arturia or Arturia, Atacine, Chalonitis, and Corduene are also mentioned by others, but there are no means of distinctly ascertaining their respective boundaries. Strabo describes it as conterminous with Persia and Susiana, and is comprehending Babylonia and a considerable portion of the surrounding district. The countries of the Elamians, Paratacinians, and Chalonitis towards Mount Zagros, the plains in the environs of Nineveh, namely Dolomenia, Calachinia, Chazinia, and Adiabene, the valleys of the Gordians and the Mygodians of Nisibis, even to Zaguma, or the bridge or place for passing the river, the site of the present Raumkala of the Euphrates, and the vast region beyond the river, inhabited by the Arabs, to the Cilicians, Phoenicians, and Libyans, and the portion of the coast comprehending the Sea of Egypt and the Gulf of Issus. Strabo Cura Casa Bauni, 1763, folio library 16, page 1070. Herodotus remarks that Babylon and the other parts of Assyria formed the ninth satrapy of Darius. It's like a state or something like that, or provinces. And as by that historian, Syria is considered as included in Assyria. This government, in this estimation, must have extended from the Mediterranean to the head of the Persian Gulf, and from Mount Taurus to the Arabian desert. and that's Herodotus in his book there, page 245. And it talks about Beck in his origins biblically, Bible origins, disputes this opinion and conceives upon grounds which he sets forth. The Nahrein of the Pentateuch is to be sought in the land of Damascus, watered by the rivers Pharpar and Abana. Okay. Is that here? By Strabo, Mesopotamia is declared to be bounded on the north by Taurus, which separates it from Armenia, that it is largest near the mountains, where between Thapsacus at the passage of the Euphrates and the point where Alexander crossed the Tigris, Alexander the Great, it is 2,400 stadia abroad, while between Babylon and Seleucia the space separating the rivers does not exceed 200 stadia. He states that the Mygodaneans inhabit the part near the Euphrates, etc., etc. Okay, there's a lot more details. Just see if there's anything here of interest here. The lower part of this province. Which one is that? Is he talking about Carkesia? Median wall which joined the two rivers and included all the space between them, the names of which have not reached our time. No doubt was subdivided into many districts, the names of which have not reached our time. The lower part of this province obtained the designation of Chaldea because after the capture of Babylon, many of the inhabitants retired there, carrying with them their arts and sciences, but this colony must be carefully distinguished from the true and ancient Chaldea, the birthplace of Terah and Abraham, or Ur of Chaldea, in Chaldea, the mother country of the wise men, the three wise men, the Magi, and doubtless of the race that ruled both there and in Nineveh. Okay, it goes on about Syria and these different peoples. And then there's a partial descent from Constantinople is arranged in the following districts. Okay, and more information. Okay, it's like the different geographical locations and the altitudes and latitudes and all sorts of stuff. And it's describing the geographical location again. Talks about the Tigris. Quite extensive on that. Then the fertility of Babylonia, which has been the theme of all ancient writers. Herodotus remarks that this province and the rest of Assyria, whereby Darius constituted the ninth satrapy of his empire. Okay, it's repeating that again. And that it contributed to a third part of the revenues of the state. Okay, so that being a satrap provided money for Darius, etc. Okay, so it's very deep into the geographical location and its benefits, its fertility, and so forth. Okay, I'm going to skip all this if we can. It goes on about a canal. The following canals are still in operation and exhibit a melancholy contrast with the magnificent catalogue of antiquity. It goes into that. Chapter 2, the history of the Assyrian monarchy, uncertainty of the chronology of these periods, necessity of adopting some consistent system of notation, errors of Usher, Lloyd and others, discrepancy of opinion between various authors, and so forth. Having thus given a description of the boundaries, divisions and general aspect, probably in the last chapter, aspect of the countries hereafter to be more minutely delineated, the author decides to now endeavour as succinctly as possible to sketch the history of the monarchies, or the rulers, the royalties, of which from the earliest times they were the seat. This is a task of no ordinary difficulty, for so obscure is the chronology of those remote periods, and perplexing are the names and actions attributed by various writers to individuals who are said to have flourished during them, that in spite of the numerous attempts to connect the detached notices on the subject, it still remains not a little dark and confused. As an instance of this, one of the discrepancies which prevails among chronologists on some of the most important epochs, it may be mentioned that Dr. Hales, in his learned work, recites upward of 120 several opinions in reference to the interval which elapsed between the creation of the world and the birth of our Saviour. And the extremes, well, Jesus the Christ, and the extremes are removed from each other by no less than 3,268 years. A difference of 1142 years occurs in like manner among authors in fixing the era of the deluge or the flood. They disagree also to the extent of 300 years regarding the time of the fall of Nineveh, and a like diversity prevails upon the date of the exodus of the Jews from Egypt, or the liberation of the Jews from Egypt by Moses. An attempt to reconcile the various systems that have produced such discordant opinions would be but an idle waste of time and unsuited to a work of this nature, which professes rather to give results than to enter into laboured disquisitions. It is proposed only to state the issue of the most successful investigations on the subject of the ancient Babylonian and Assyrian monarchies. But in order to succeed, even in this, some system of chronology must be adopted, and we shall shortly explain the nature of that which has been preferred. It is generally known that the scheme of Usher, Lloyd and others, which furnishes the marginal dates in the authorized versions of the scriptures, that would be what we find in the Scofield Reference Bible, and was adopted in the 8th century in place of the more ancient notation of the Septuagint, is now held to be altogether erroneous. Usher said, creation was all completed by God in 4000 BC, but we found that couldn't be possible if the Egyptian prototype pyramid mounds were created and left around 2000 BCE. So this Usher, supposedly, we may be wrong, he's giving the year, the date of when all this happened. He's supposedly wrong, erroneous. The era of creation, according to that account, is only 4,004 years anterior to the birth of Christ. That's basically what we were saying about Usher. The following are considered as among the highest authorities on the subject: Josephus, according to various authors; the Septuagint; Syncellus; Pizarron, Eusebius, Jackson, and Hales. Well, this Josephus, take it with a grain of salt, because apparently someone's added to his works. Top theologians like Bart D. Ehrman, etc. say, you can see there's a different style there. Like someone else is writing, putting these writings in there. Syncellus, I don't know about that guy. Pizarron, Eusebius, supposed to be an exaggerator. I don't know about these Jackson and Hales, they must be like later, near modern or modern times. Dr. Russell Herner's Connection of Sacred and Profane History, gets down the bottom here, Volume 1 Preliminary Dissertation and Volume 2 Chapter 1, has examined the subject with great assiduity and learning, and who has consulted not only the writings of Jewish and pagan historians and of the early fathers, but also the works of the most distinguished modern chronologists, inclines to fix this important point in the year BC 544-1, which, being nearly a mean of the best authorities, will venture to adopt as that by which to determine such dates as admit of precise notation. On the same grounds, he places the era of the deluge or the flood in BC 3185, or after the creation 2256, making to the era of redemption 5441. Assuming therefore this point as established, we shall proceed to the history of those early ages, so far as there are grounds on which to base our narrative, or the narrative. The principal sources of information are first the scriptures of the Old Testament, and secondly the writings of several Greek historians who have treated of these times. Of these last, the two most important are Herodotus, said to be the Greek father of history. He known to exaggerate as well. Say, there's 300 Spartans here when there was actually 900, because the Athenians had left, but this other group stayed with the Spartans and died with them. Okay. It tends to be a little bit exaggerated. Like that movie 300. Yeah, it was pretty good, but it was really exaggerated. Like that guy with the eye patch. Oh, the brave 300 and all this. It makes me want to go there and stab him, with a spear. Sometimes he just wishes he'd shut up. He's like the narrator, I suppose, reciting Herodotus and his writings. But yeah, the guy's quite annoying. Yeah. It would have been the first guy I would have shot with an arrow if I was the enemy. Oh, the brave Spartans. Oh, the 300 and all this stuff. Like, yeah, shut up, bro. Yeah. Okay. Of the last, the two most important are Herodotus, who lived about the year BC 430, contemporary with Nehemiah and Malachi, and who himself visited Babylon and saw its condition only 100 years after it was taken by Cyrus. The other is Ctesias, a physician of Cnidos, who accompanied Cyrus the Younger in that quality on his expedition against his brother Artaxerxes. Menomon. That's probably that Xerxes on the 300, but that one's exaggerated as well. They made him look like he was a bit of a girly, bit feminine, probably swung both ways, and he had all this jewelry on him, all that sort of stuff. Nah, see the real pictures of him, he didn't look anything like that. He was taken prisoner at the Battle of Canaxa, BC 399. Then again, it could be a different Xerxes, and resided at the court of that monarch 17 years. From the writings of these two historians, it will be found that all subsequent annalists and geographers, including Diodorus and Strabo, have chiefly drawn their materials, and it is these original elements, multiplied and often distorted by the theories and conjectures of numerous commentators, that supply all the information we really possess regarding those early and obscure periods in the history of man. The authors of the Universal History, a work of deep erudition and research, inclined to reject almost entirely the testimony of Ctesias, whose long list of kings, with its mixture of Greek, Egyptian, Persian and Median names, seems to destroy the pretensions of its compiler to veracity, while they attach much credit to the accounts of Herodotus, a Greek, as agreeing for far better than those other historians with the chronology of sacred writ and the few insulated facts that can be brought to bear upon the subject. According to their computation, after this historian, the Assyrian monarchy commenced 1236 BC and continued 520 years. And there's a reference down the bottom here. Ancient Universal History. Okay, look at that book. Dr. Russell, in his very elaborate examination of the question for which we must refer our readers to the work itself, Volume 2, Chapter 1, comes to the conclusion that the account of Ctesias is by no means to be altogether rejected, and the result of his inquiry is to place the origin of the Assyrian Empire in the year BC 2126, or after the flood, 1059, which, with the assumed period from the creation, 2256, okay, that's good. So that's a total of 3185. With the assumed period from the creation to the flood, 2256, makes up to the birth of Christ, 544-1, and he observes that this comes to within 1 year of the date fixed by Ctesias for the commencement of his catalogue of the Assyrian monarchs, the accession of Ninus being placed in the year BC 2127. Proceeding with his retrospect and quoting from the chronographia of Syncellus of the Chaldean kings who succeeded Nimrud at Babylon, Dr. Russell carries back the commencement of that monarch's reign, or the origin of the first Babylonian monarchy, to the year 601 or 619 after the deluge or flood. That is to BC 2566. The difference between the two former sums arising from an equivalent difference assigned to the duration of certain reigns, according to Syncellus and Alexander Polyhistor. A third dynasty has been added to these by Moses of Chorin, an Armenian historian, who quotes from Abydenus, a compiler of Chaldean records, but he inclines to reject this as being quite unknown to the two former authors. It is to be observed that these three later and Christian writers are the only ones who have touched upon this portion of Babylonian history. All other commencing their labours only with sacred writ or writings determines its short but invaluable notices upon this dark era. The fact has been prominently set forward by Mr. Beck in his laborious and interesting work of Biblical Origins, in which he examines with great ingenuity everything which has been presented to us on these important points in the sacred volume, and rejects almost entirely all other evidence upon the subject as fabulous and unsatisfactory. It must in fact be confessed that with regard to the earliest period of the Babylonian annals, we have no other source of information worthy of any credit besides the Bible, and all which we learn there is the bare fact that at a certain time Nimrud, a son or descendant of Cush, attained to great power and founded a kingdom, the beginning of which was Babel, and Erech, modern day Iraq, and Akkad and Calneh in the land of Shinar or Sumer. In the same manner, the whole which we are told regarding the foundation of an Assyrian kingdom is thus at some period equally undetermined. Out of that land of Shinar went forth Ashur and builded Nineveh. So he was actually a mortal. He was the king, and the legions were around him, right? In the city Rehoboth and Calah and Rezin, between Nineveh and Calah. Rezin is that the city that the king of I can't name starts. That might be Rezin, yeah. King of Rezin and the house of Israel gathered together. They united and they went and attacked a certain Syrian town or city. The men of Judah, the Yehudai, they attacked them and then they ruled that city according to the scriptures. It is true that the proper reading of this passage has been much disputed for many authorities, both English and German, contend that its true meaning is that Nimrod went forth as a conqueror into the land of Ashur and building Nineveh and the other towns. In either case, Ashur must have preceded Nimrod, came before him, right? And as we find the country already called by his name, and further down we are informed that he was a son or descendant of Shem. Of the kingdom of Babylon we hear no more from scripture, history till the days of Merodach Baladan, BC 721, who revolted from the Assyrians and wrote to King Hezekiah, while the first mention of an Assyrian monarch is in the year BC 821, when Jonah was sent to one in Nineveh, who by some is supposed to be identical with the Arbaces of Ctesias. Considering as we do the sacred volume as containing the only undoubted source of information on the subject, down to the era of Nabonassar BC 747, when the canon of Ptolemy, founded on astronomical observation, commences, Nabonassar having himself destroyed all records of antecedent kings and dynasties. It would still be improper in a work of this sort to pass over entirely the testimony of historians who have written from such sources as were open to them, and which, amongst a great mass of error and fable, unquestionably contains some facts which may be reconciled with those that proceed from less doubtful sources. We shall therefore give a succinct account of the origin of the two monarchies as it appears in the most accredited histories, and in order to assist the reader in comprehending or understanding the chronology of the period, we have framed the accompanying table upon the data already referred to, showing the dynasties, names of kings, periods of their respective reigns, and the year of their accession before the Christian era, from the rise of the Babylonian power under go back there because I don't know what that last word was. Probably Nebuchadnezzar or something like that. Okay, under Nimrod, and that of Assyria under Ashur, down to the extinction of both by the arms of the renowned Cyrus the Persian in the year BC 536. So here it is here. It's like a king's list, right? Babylonian, Chaldean kings, Nimrod. These kings down here. Ashur, period unknown, went up from Shinar and built Nineveh and other cities. No account of his successors till the time of Ninus. Assyrian Empire. Semiramis, that's the wife of Nimrud, apparently. That said that she had this baby to him, even though Nimrud was dead. And she says it was a reincarnation of Nimrud, apparently, according to the stories, the legend, whatever. Yeah. So she ruled for a time there. What's her son called? Tammuz? Can't really remember. Yeah. There's quite a lot there. Assyrian sovereigns according to scripture and Ptolemy. 1. King of Assyria, mentioned in Jonah, unnamed, probably identical with Bacchus of Ctesias. Jonah's prophecy about Pul or Belus. Okay, Jonah's prophecy about something. Probably the forthcoming wrath of God. Sennacherib, Esarhaddon, or said Danapolis 1. Babylonian Empire after the capture of Nineveh, according to scripture, Ptolemy, Berosus, Herodotus, and Xenophon. It is unnecessary to repeat the list of Chaldean and Arabian kings which appear in the table, as no particulars whatever are given of their reigns. The last of them, if ever they had an existence, being overthrown and probably put to death by the celebrated Ninus. The first in Ctesias's catalogue of Assyrian rulers, who at this time waxed great and succeeded in uniting under one sovereign the crowns of Assyria and Babylon. And continues. Then continues in that same writer, the very medley of names. Greek, Egyptian, and Persian argue his list to be that grossest forgery. In the canon of scripture, all the 5 names recorded are evidently Assyrian, being derived from the names of their gods. Thus we find Pul or Ful, Tiglath-Pileser for Tiglath-Pul-Assur, Shalmaneser for Shalman-Assur, and Esarhaddon for Assur-Haddon, whereas no such analogy is observable in the list of Ctesias and as follows, and so forth. And some Ninus or someone claiming that they conquered all these different areas when there's no record of it. It talks about Ninus, the first mentioned sovereign, represented as a martial and ambitious prince who, conceiving the idea of extensive conquest, trained up the youth of his kingdom to warlike usages and personal endurance. By these means, having created a formidable army, he entered into a league with the king of Arabia, by whose assistance he overran Babylonia, reduced its cities and strongholds, carrying the royal family away to captivity and death. Armenia, his next object, would have fallen an easy prey had not its king Barzanus appeared the conqueror with gifts and consented to become his vassal. So he basically kissed more than his ring. It continues about their warring. And then this is the reign of Semiramis. It's Nimrod's wife, apparently. Who had the baby when he was dead, but she had this reincarnation of Nimrud. By this lady, the Assyrian ruler had a son named Ninyas, who succeeded his mother on the throne. For himself, he did not live long to enjoy his triumphs. Secure on the throne, Semiramis now thought only of eclipsing the glory of her husband, and her first act was to build a city of Babylon. To build the city of Babylon, the same, we are told, of which the ruins through excite the astonishment of travellers, and the magnificence of which, according to the account preserved from Ctesias, what his name is calculated to excite doubt even more than amazement. Nor were her splendid works confined to the metropolis. The banks of the Euphrates and Tigris were embellished with towns, and the commerce of her empire was improved by various judicious measures, as were its agricultural resources by the canals that she caused to be formed. Having completed her operation in Mesopotamia, Semiramis assembled a vast army and marched into Media, left there also magnificent monuments of her power and taste, and where during the completion of these works, according to some authors, she abandoned herself for a long time to a course of the most profligate vice and luxury. So she indulged herself, right? She had all the comforts, yeah? So she let herself go. But arousing from this disgraceful sloth, she visited the whole of her Asiatic dominions, and passing therefore through Egypt, added the greater part of Libya to her wide territories. From thence she marched to reduce Ethiopia. And having settled affairs in that quarter, she again entered Asia and reposed for a while at Bactria. She just took it easy there, right? But tranquility had no charms for this restless conqueror. The wealth and prosperity of distant India excited her ambition. She longed to view its wonders, to possess its riches, and therefore she resolved to invade it. 3 years were consumed in preparing an armament suited to this great enterprise, and the force with which she at last left Bactria is by Ctesias set down at the incredible multitude of 3 million foot, 200,000 horse, 100,000 armed chariots, 100,000 armed camel men, besides artificers. To these were added 2,000 vessels for navigating the Indus, or boats, carried to the banks of the river on camels, together with the hides of 300,000 black oxen, made into artificial elephants, formed for the purpose of familiarizing her cavalry with the sight of these animals, as well as to terrify the Indians and encourage their own troops by a show of the counterfeit quadrupeds. The preparations made by Stavrobatus, the sovereign of India, for repelling this alarming invasion was such as became a powerful prince, jealous of his independence and indignant at an unprovoked aggression. It is asserted that he gathered together a far greater army than Semiramis commanded, and adding contumely to defiance, upbraided his enemy with her infamous mode of life, and threatened, should his arms be successful, to put her to a cruel death. She smiled at his threats and advanced to the Indus. He does not know me yet, said she. He will soon have an opportunity of judging me by my actions and deportment. But the height of her fortune and the limit of her empire had now been reached. A temporary success rendered her bold and decoyed across the river, over which she constructed a bridge of boats. She came to a decisive action with the Indian king. Her artificial elephants could not withstand the shock of the true ones, and being wounded in a combat hand to hand with Stavrobates, she was forced to recross the stream. The bridge was destroyed in order to check pursuit, but though many of the Indians perished in the struggle, a multitude of her own troops also were destroyed, and the Assyrian queen retreated to Bactria with scarcely a third part of her army. That was the last of her enterprises. Her own son, desiring to anticipate the prediction of an oracle which declared that she should at a certain period disappear from the eyes of men, sent a eunuch to assassinate her. He sent one to assassinate his own mother. She forgave him the attempt, surrendered herself into his hands, and was translated from earth. She's deported, right? Transported. As was asserted, in the form of a dove, a flock of which birds had settled at the moment upon her palace. Such, after a glorious and successful reign of 42 years and a life of 62, was the end of the celebrated Semiramis, and the description of her actions alone has been held by many as clearly decisive as to the defect of the historian's claim to credit. It is not alone the incredible numbers of her army and vast preparation that casts over the narrative an air of fable, for this may be found in other authors, both Greek and Mohammedan, in relating facts which they themselves rest on undisputable evidence. We may instance the enormous armaments attributed to Darius and Xerxes in the invasion of Greece, and the incredible multitudes of human beings said to have been slaughtered by Genghis Khan. In the sack and destruction of 5 cities alone, Merva, Nishapur, Herat, Ray, and Baghdad, the number of persons put to death, according to the historians of Genghis, exceeds 8 million. Oh my gosh, that's a hell of a lot of people to kill.